Hello, welcome to the another special interview episode for Reanimate This Podcast. So I'm here with our guest, Ted Efremoff, and he has this movie, or documentary to be precise, called A Refugee's Guide to Rome.
Something that I describe as we are not satisfied with what we have. The freedom that we have, we are not using the value of it. Our people were forced to slavery, but today we give ourselves to be a slave, a civilized slave. I know you leave your country because of different purposes. It might be because of war. It might be because of persecution. On the process, there will be fighting. Make no mistake. On the process, there will be racial discrimination. Make no mistake. And one thing I want you to know, this country was started by a refugee. His name is Aeneas. He is an indigene of Troy. At times, we must not learn to see the outside, but see the inside and say, this guy will become somebody in the future.
Ted, would you like to introduce yourself before I throw you some couple of questions?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ted Efremoff. I'm an artist and a filmmaker based in the Northeast US. And I tend to work in a lot of different media, film, video, performance, installation. So I recently made a film called A Refugee's Guide to Rome.
Yeah, so congratulations on that. So congratulations on your latest movie. So I want to ask, what was your inspiration behind this movie?
It's a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to keep it short. I grew up in the Soviet Union. I was born in Moscow in 1964, and when I was 16, my family moved from the Soviet Union to the US, and we stayed in Rome for a month and a half to get our documents processed. And as a kid growing up in the Soviet Union, basically most of the population wasn't allowed to leave the country. So it was my first time outside of the Soviet Union, and I fell in love with Rome. I thought it was an amazing place. And I, kept going back there. And eventually I decided I wanted to make a film about, influx of people from outside of Rome, refugees coming into Rome or through Rome. And that's how this movie was born.
Oh, yes. I don't know. It reminds me of a lot of like a. Have you ever watched like Federico Fellini movies?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It sounds like a premise out of his movie.
Yeah,
Like,
I think there's something, in his movies kind of have these processions where people are like mulling about or walking through landscapes. And this film has quite a bit of that. The protagonist of the film, Joseph Peters, who's a refugee from Sierra Leone, he's basically walking us all around the city
mhm,
and talking to us about his experience.
mhm. So, how did you get to know Joseph?
That's an interesting story. In 2018, I wrote a grant to travel to Rome. I went to Rome for 6 weeks in the summer, and I wrote a few emails to people who were directors of refugee centers in Rome. I knew there was a huge amount of African and Middle Eastern refugees in the city. And I asked them to contact me with a person who has speaks English, first of all, and secondly has an interesting story. And one of the a director of the Joel Nafuma Refugee Center in Rome got back to me right away and said, "I have just the person for you." He was a journalist in Sierra Leone. He lived through the Civil War. He had to escape because he was a LGBT, not an activist, but he was in support of LGBT issues in Sierra Leone. And so I met Joseph, and within a couple of days, we decided to work together. I loved his attitude and his demeanor and his storytelling ability.
So, judging by the trailer alone, he Joseph says that the the Roman Empire and the city of Rome itself is founded by a refugee, which is yeah, I think I partially remember the story about it's a very well-known story from Aeneas. Did I pronounce that right? But
Yeah, it's the story of Aeneas, who's
yeah.
he's the basically the mythological founder of Rome. There was a famous ancient Roman poet called Virgil,
Mm-hmm.
and he wrote the
Yep.
story called the Aeneid. And in
Yes.
the Aeneid, Aeneas is he's a Trojan prince who, when the Greeks,
Mhm.
if you know the Iliad and the Odyssey, uh,
Yes, the
and
battle in Troy.
yeah, so
This is decade-long war.
yeah, exactly, 10-year long war, and finally the Greeks sort of trick the Trojans by making the Trojan horse. They hide soldiers in it, and then the Trojans bring it into the city. They lock the gates, and at night the Greeks, with the leader of Odysseus, climb out and they start to fight and burn down Troy. So
Yep.
Aeneas was a Trojan prince who fought the Greeks for 10 years, and he was in that battle and he saw his city being destroyed. So, very famously, he's supposed to have left the city with his father, Anchises, on his back, and his son holding the hand of his son. So, if you're in
Mhm.
Rome, you will see these statues of Aeneas with an old man on his back and his son by his side. So he escapes and then he takes this very long journey around the Mediterranean looking for a home. And he winds up
Mm.
in a place called Cuma, Italy, which was a Greek colony. And he is the mythological founder of Rome. So this story is Virgil's answer to the Odyssey of the Greeks, basically.
Yes, Virgil before he took Dante Alighieri to hell and to heaven.
Yes, correct. And in the Aeneid, Aeneas, there's this priestess of Apollo. Her name
Mhm.
is the Sibyl of Cuma. She takes Aeneas into the underworld as well. And in my film, I have kind of a modern underworld. There are all these catacombs under Rome. So Joseph
Mhm.
goes down there and tells this story in the film.
So, yes, Joseph will be our Virgil. Or
He a little more like our Aeneas.
okay, he's both Aeneas and Virgil. I don't know, like I'm trying to make a reference to Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy right there.
Oh yeah,
So
makes
that's what I
sense.
meant. Mhm.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so let's see. I feel like this is a better story that Christopher Nolan should have told instead of the Odyssey itself. Like,
Well, I think it's interesting because these big stories, like the film Troy and
mhm,
now the Odyssey, they're being retold over and over again by various
mhm,
filmmakers and animators. And
mhm,
it's interesting that like these stories just don't die because they're so ingrained in Western culture. And
mhm,
but the Aeneid is a little bit less well known, but it was actually Caesar Augustus
mhm,
commissioned Virgil to write this story because he needed a story. He was the guy that
Mhm.
took Rome from republic to an empire. Basically, he wanted to be the Caesar. He didn't want
Mhm.
it to be a republic anymore. So he wanted to be the sole leader. And
Mhm.
his family was supposed to be descendant from Aeneas. And so he
Mhm.
had Virgil write this story as kind of a propaganda tale to
Yeah.
inspire Romans to believe in him as the leader. And
Yeah.
the fact that the Greeks didn't have these amazing foundation myths like the Iliad and the Odyssey, so they wanted to one up the Romans didn't have those stories, so they wanted to one up the Greeks. They conquered the Greeks, and they needed a story as big as the Iliad or the Odyssey, basically.
I remember hear, hearing about this, and people have said that the Aeneid is the one of the early political propaganda or the early propaganda pieces.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
The Iliad, the Aeneid was, it's an epic poem, but it's
Hmm.
also a early propaganda piece. And back in those days, it was very popular among the elite to say that they were descendants of the gods, because, of course, you would follow somebody who's the descendant of a god.
Yeah, I heard like a lot of Greek mythology story about, oh, this king is a descendant of Zeus, or oh, this king is like descendant of this Olympian deity. It is
Absolutely.
it's sort of like, and you could probably take it, at the face value, or you could just accept it as some sort of exaggeration. But you, well, tale as old as time. I mean, I know someone who said that he's a descendant of the the Mel Gibson character in Braveheart. Though, God, I forgot the name.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
William Wallace. There we go. I heard some people say that. Oh, I'm actually a descendant of William Wallace. I'm like, yeah, okay,
Uh,
cool story, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and I think, to this day we have sort of the leftover appendages of monarchy and various
Yeah.
aristocrats who sort of claim their fame to the kings and the leaders. Absolutely.
Yeah, like I said, tale as old as time. So, besides all that, do you have like a personal favorite, like a Greco-Roman mythology story?
When I was a kid, I grew up reading the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I think to me they were like I don't know. I guess in a way I was animating them in my head. They were
Mhm.
like, the Iliad is basically the story of
Mhm.
this giant battle
Mhm.
over Ellen of Troy. And, you imagine the action taking place. I think that's why books are so cool because everyone animates the story their own way in their
Mhm.
head. So it's
Mhm.
never one visual. It's always like a myriad of visuals. So I was kind of obsessed with those two stories.
All right. So you really imagine a lot of things, and I went to your website, and it looks like you are a very prolific artist. Like not only like filmmaking, also like art installation, and among other things. And is it yes? So what inspired you to become like a multidisciplinary artist?
So I grew up in the Soviet Union. I moved to Philly when I was 16, and I went to almost like every school in Philadelphia. I went to PAFA, well, first I went to a high school called Creative and Performing Arts in Philadelphia. My father and uncle were both artists, so that's kind of what I picked up. Studied almost like classical Caravaggio style painting. Then I went to the Art Institute of Philadelphia. I became a graphic designer. Then I went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. I became a painter. And for about 10 years, I was a painter in Philadelphia. I made like semi-abstract cityscape, landscape type work and just showed in galleries. and I taught K through 12 art at a charter school in Philly. And then the job was like kind of overwhelming. I had like 40 kids in every classroom. It was just a lot. So I escaped to go to grad school. And also to make a living in Philly, I was a carpenter and a sort of a handyman. So when I came to grad school, I went to UConn and I moved to Connecticut. And I basically, in my letter to the school, I said, I want to experiment. So that was in 2004. Came to grad school here at UConn, and I had a lot of skills as a carpenter. So I started building environments, and then gradually I started projecting video into those environments. And I just like forgot all about painting. I just like this whole new world opened up to me, and I'm the type of person that needs to learn new things all the time. So, like an interdisciplinary practice fits me better. And so I kind of took off, started doing installation, video performance, sculpture, environmental art. And I prefer working in these modalities because it keeps me interested.
Ah, so speaking of experiments, so when you messaged me, you mentioned the Five Obstructions, which is a documentary about Lars von Trier, the Danish film director, asking his mentor Jürgen Lest to redo his short film 5 times. And as I remember, you mentioned that this is like one of your favorite movie. Is that correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
So what do you think about, so I want to know your like full thought about this documentary. Like how do you like find that out, and what made you to become this one of your favorite movies of all time?
Well, it's interesting. I feel like I never really sat down and tried to figure out what my path in life should be.
Mhm,
But I know my grandfather was a theater director in the Soviet Union. My grandmother was a writer. My mom a teacher. My father an artist. So I kind of became all those things. I write scripts. I direct films. I teach at a university, and I'm an artist. And so my path really was, I think, very intuitive, almost like some kind of subconscious thing. So when I saw this film, I didn't consider myself a filmmaker. I don't think I might have made one video at this point, but I
mhm,
looked at it as look at all these ways that you can reimagine something, right? And
mhm,
I think this particular film, Lars von Trier,
mhm,
he's asking his mentor, who's kind of like in a little bit of a funk. Maybe he's
mhm,
in a depression actually, and he's asking him to remake this film as a way to get out of his funk. And he's
mhm.
giving him these. He's creating difficulty for him to make this film. He's saying it can only be, each episode can only be this long, and it has to include an animation, and he actually hates animation. So
Yes.
watching this film, I was like, wow, so one person can reimagine the same thing in like five different ways, right? And so this
Mhm,
is kind of about the art making process. And it really interested me in this variety of ways that something can be made. And of course, these are like world-class cinematographers, so they're very good at this. And then I watched them communicate with the animator who's actually producing one part of this. Uh,
mhm.
the,
Off Davison.
Right. The original film was by Jorgen Leth, The Perfect Human, and they're remaking it several times.
Mhm,
And I don't know, it just sparked my imagination. It like allowed me to figure out, hey, if I can't do it in this way, I can do it in this way. So now, as a filmmaker and as an artist, I look for a variety of potentials of an artwork and then look at how I can make that happen in the best possible way for that particular idea.
So that was like the topic of this podcast very first episode where we talked about the how film directors work around with certain limitations, like given like certain creative constraints.
Yeah.
And what fascinates me about that segment, the segment about Jorgen Less, the late Jorgen Less, asking Bob Savinson to help him to make the the animated take on the perfect human. It shows you that what he felt missing about the medium that he had no interest in. I mean,
Yeah.
as you can see, the animated take on the perfect human is very poetic. Like it's just as poetic as is the original live action version, and how he could work around with that.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point you make that Leth was kind of like forced to work in a medium that he kind of despised, but he tried to bring to it what he thought it was missing. So almost like improve it for himself, so that it was palatable to him. I think that's an interesting point. Like
Yeah, I mean my guess is that he never seen like an animated media that is incorporate poetry or done in a very poetic way.
mm,
So, but it really shows you what he what he felt was missing with relating to his experience with the medium of animation.
yeah, I don't know. As a kid growing up in the Soviet Union, I watched, cartoons. There was this series. It was called Nu Pagadi, which means like
Ah,
just you
yes.
wait, just you wait. And it was like this wolf constantly chasing this rabbit, and I think it was like a takeoff on American like Bugs Bunny or something like that, or Tom and Jerry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
I
but
I thought I'm sort of familiar with the Pagodi is because every like Russian or Russian speaker or anyone who grew up in like a former Soviet republic had told me this is the cartoon that they watch
yeah.
when they were a kid and they have fond memories of. And I assume that this was like Soviet Union's take on Tom and Jerry, but I found that this was pre-existed before Tom and Jerry.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know. I don't know. Hold on, let me check.
I don't know if that's true. I think Tom and Jerry is older, but I could be wrong.
hmm So let's see. So okay, it started in the 1969. Tom and Jerry is okay. Okay, so no. It didn't preceded Tom and Jerry, but still. So I'm sorry I got that fact wrong. So yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah.
but also Bugs Bunny is like this traditional like
hmm
one guy is chasing another guy basically.
hmm Yeah, and then
Um,
there's like a Roadrunner and
mm,
thing with Wile E. Coyote.
yeah, but
So and
Soviet animation also has, as you mentioned, like very poetic, like Hedgehog in the Fog, that
oh
type of
yes.
animation, which is like a very poetic, deep, like physically beautiful, like ephemeral kind of thing.
Yeah, I really love Yuri Norstein's short films.
Yeah, so there's a
And
there's a tradition of these like almost like handmade, beautiful
mhm.
animations in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, and my in the past I also my we had like an Armenian theme episode and we talked about like Soviet Armenian
Oh,
animation. Mhm,
interesting.
mhm,
Yeah, but I was thinking for this conversation, I kind of like
mhm,
to kind of prepare for it. I was thinking, well, if I were to animate my film, if somebody said, okay, take a refugee's guide to Rome. So it
mhm,
just came out on digital
mhm,
platforms like Documentary Plus, Hoopla, Tubi, Amazon, and I'm sort of like promoting it right now. And if someone said to me,
mhm,
okay, what type of animation would you make? Like
mhm.
right away, I thought about there's this interesting thing. Have you heard of it? It's called archaeoacoustics.
Um, Never heard of it.
Yeah, so archaeoacoustics is this concept that
Hmm.
um, imagine someone making a vessel like a pot, a piece of ceramics,
Hmm. Hmm.
1,000 years ago,
Hmm.
and they're using a primitive wheel, and they
Hmm.
have a stylus, and they're putting a
Hmm.
design onto the sort of a raw clay pot, and they're making it move with the wheel, and
Hmm.
at the same time, so their stylus is made out of like a reed or a bird's feather or something. It's very
Hmm.
sensitive. So at the same
Yeah.
time, they're talking to somebody, and
So,
the idea is
yes.
that their voice is actually being imprinted into this clay pot. And then later, you could like scan this pot and get the sound of their voice out. So there was an episode of, I forget the name of the show, but it's like these two guys that they try to prove or disprove various like historical facts.
Hmm.
Anyway, and they tried to mimic this idea. Uh,
Hmm.
so for my film, I would use like pots from
Hmm.
ancient Rome,
Hmm.
and I would draw like basically an animation on the pot. So if you spun it, it would be almost like a zoetrope, and then you would
Hmm.
see it. And because it's like two different cultures, one is Roman, ancient and contemporary, and the other
Hmm.
one is Sierra Leonean,
Hmm.
the other part, I would like to be animated more like something like there are these various societies like the Odelay Society of Art in
Hmm.
Freetown, Sierra Leone.
Hmm.
There's a textile art called Gara, I believe, and then there are these interesting masks made by women. They're hand carved and they're sort of these helmet masks, and they're used in various rituals. So I would like the other part to be told from the perspective, almost like use a Sierra Leonean animator and use those ancient tribal artworks to tell that story. So kind of a mix of cultures. I could see it being like that.
Hmm. That's very interesting. When you told me that the archaeoacoustic, I immediately thought of zoetrope, and then you mentioned it. So it was a zoetrope at that time. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I think archaeoacoustics is actually fairly controversial, you know,
Okay.
and there are scientists who are trying to prove that there's a potential for that.
Hmm.
And then there are other parts to archaeoacoustics, like spaces can almost like retain sound, and then contemporary scientists would try to regain that sound from
Hmm.
spaces. And then there are scientists who say that that's not possible and they try to disprove this theory. But in any case, I think it's interesting to, mine history for potential creative fodder.
Hmm. I believe uh I believe it was either Walt Disney or Steven Spielberg has said that the animation is the grandfather of live action filmmaking, and because the the medium of animation actually dates back to the time of the cave people drawing on the wall and telling a story with this
Yeah.
drawing.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's interesting. About 3,500 years ago, cave art goes from, from let's say 100,000 years ago till 35,000 years ago, the cave art was all like geometric patterns primarily. And people
Mhm.
think that those patterns relate to trance that people would get into through either some sort of peyote or those types of substances,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
even some societies dance for 12 hours to get into a trance. But
Mhm.
at 35,000 years, we start
Mhm.
to see very realistic cave art, including
Mhm.
cave sculpture. And yeah, there are these theories that people sat with fire that flickered and kind of brought these things in and out of view, and that some of the cave art was akin to animation, like early animation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
And I also I realize how it all incorporates well with this oral storytelling that started with Homer. I mean, okay, Homer did not invent oral storytelling, but he sort of, how should I put it? He was like one of the like who wrote his own poetry just by talking.
Yeah, like actually the Homeric myths, they
Mhm,
weren't written down. They were
mhm,
they were oral tradition.
mhm,
And we really don't know who invented them or created them, but Homer is credited with it.
mhm,
And but there were people who were poets or
mhm,
storytellers that would
mhm,
travel from town to town or village to village, and they
mhm,
would have that whole story in their head, and it might
mhm,
take them 4 hours to tell this story, and they would come into a village, and it was probably quite a celebration for the villagers to have this
mhm,
person come who had this amazing epic poem in their head and who could recite that. And this is
mhm,
something that, we're losing rapidly, the ability to retain incredible amounts of information in our mind. But those people, I think, it was a tradition that was quite distributed around the world, and there were people
mhm.
that were able to do that who were kind of looked at as very important parts of society.
And I believe I'm pretty sure this tradition still continues into this day, considering what I know this is a bit of an off topic, but what I like about the works of the late Cormac McCarthy is that he's keeping this oral storytelling tradition alive, and his prose shows. I'm not sure you ever read a Cormac McCarthy novel, but he's famous for not using quotation marks. But however, his the and from my point of view, the reason why he never used quotation is probably because of he wants the dialogue to be part of the descriptions.
Hmm.
He makes it reads like someone's telling the entire story in one setting through his own mouth with only like one single breath.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Interesting. Well, there's this interesting story or this interesting book. It was one of the very first books ever made, ever printed. It was
Mhm,
called the Hypnera Timachia Polyphily, and
mhm,
it was made in Venice. And it's sort of like a dream, and the dreamer is sort of in love with architecture in
mhm,
almost a physical way, but he also has this female
mhm,
that he's in love with. But that particular story is written in several different languages. It's written in ancient Venetian
mhm,
and other languages. So that particular story is like the beginning of mass production of stories, as opposed to an oral tradition of telling the story. Now
mhm,
we're switching to, hey, we can make this story in 20 exemplars or 20 things, 20 books or 100 books or 1,000 books. And now, of course, we're in this like prolific proliferation of stories and anime and everything else. We have
mhm.
everything at our fingertips. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and when you mentioned that this person sort of has this weird I don't know, like a trance when he sees like this architecture, I immediately thought of the Stendhal syndrome. Have you heard about Stendhal syndrome, where someone gets into like a very, how should I say, very hazy state of mind whenever they see like an artwork or that left them with like deep impression?
No, I haven't heard of it. It sounds interesting.
Yes, that's like a the psychological condition.
Hmm.
So yes,
Is it like a state of wonder?
sort of, but it's very specific kind of state of wonder.
Hmm.
So let's say, yes, it's it's very interesting. You mentioned about the cave paintings and how it also relates to oral storytelling, and we kind of talked about that. And you also said that you wanted if you wanted to do like a refugee guide to Rome, you wanted to do it in the style of like a Greek face painting, like it's moving, and it not just it's moving, but it looks like told in like a sequential order, as
Hmm.
you would see in Zoetrope.
Yeah, something like
So
that.
yeah, so like what do you have like a certain animator in mind or certain animation studio who could, have to get this to life?
I have to admit that I'm pretty ignorant about animation in general. So I would probably defer to you. Can you think of somebody that can do that well?
Um, to be honest, not much, but I still get the full picture of what you're saying, what you're describing. So I'm more thinking of some anime who would be very open to doing an experiment, but does it also involve like voiceover narration?
Uh, yeah, absolutely. I think I would keep the particular voiceover that's currently in the film.
Hmm.
Well, one uh, type of anim. Now, I don't think this would particularly work for the style, but I love the work of Studio Ghibli,
Uh-huh.
and I could see. It's also interesting how those particular films they're sort of created on the go. They're not particularly well, I'm sure there's a script, but they don't stick to the script. Miyazaki doesn't particularly stick to a script. So I could see like the creative breadth of that studio would handle this particular like concept, I think, very well.
Ah, interesting. Okay, I haven't seen this movie, but I feel like there's like this one animated documentary that also dealt with a similar subject. Have you heard of this movie called Flea?
Flea.
Mhm.
I
It's
have not.
about it's about Afghan refugee who escaped to the I think he escaped to Denmark, and the entire documentary is about his life in Afghanistan and his own, struggle with coming out as a gay man and how
Yeah,
he became a victim of like human trafficking.
yeah, I just got it up on my screen. Yeah, it
Hmm.
looks I like the style of the drawing.
Hmm.
Yeah, that looks like an interesting piece. I would like to watch that.
Yeah, I've I really need to watch that considering it's well known for getting like a three different Oscar nominations, and I think in that same year the people at the Academy just doesn't consider animation as like a medium for
Sure.
that could tell inherently adult stories just for kids.
Yeah, well,
Even
I
th-
think I mean absolutely animation, is like a marriage of drawing, in a more traditional sense, marriage of drawing and storytelling. So I think, you know, if you can look at the world's best drafts people, they could tell any story through that.
Mhm.
And then to animate that, I think is a beautiful concept.
Ah, all right. So I think before we wrap this up, even though we still have plenty of time, but I just wonder what is your personal favorite out of the your past work?
Oh wow. Uh there's a couple of pieces that So one of the things I do as an artist, I make things that people use. And those artworks, they have longer extended time. They live on for a long time. So I made a piece in East Haddam, Connecticut. There's an artist residency. It's called iPark. And I made a piece there called The Floating Living Room. So it's basically a raft. And I just recently made the fourth iteration of it. So I started it in 2007, I believe. And I made one. It's a raft. It had a glass part of a floor was glass, so you could see under the raft. It's on a pond. It had like a really comfortable couch. It had a lamp, and it had a little library on it, and people could just row out and like read or because this particular place is an artist residency, it's used by artists. Artists found all kinds of ways, all kinds of things to do there. They'd like dance performances or musical performances. And then you could even bring a television out there and watch it. It had power available to it. Then I made an so because it lives outside all year round, the weather really beats it up. So then I made one that's a little more like solid. It's made out of white oak, which lasts out in the rain and much longer. And it was kind of like a shaker, almost furniture design. And I just finished the last version of it a year and a half ago. It's big, the biggest one I've made. Opera singers have performed on it, dance, music. People bring easels out there and paint. So, and it's really, I don't feel like it's my most creative idea, but it's the idea that's lasted the longest, and it's kind of done in service of the artists that come to this residency. So they get a chance. It has some binoculars on it, some books about local flora and fauna. It has sketchbooks, journals on it. So they get to use it, and I think it's kind of had the most legs, I would say. So that's I wouldn't say it's my most creative idea, but it's the idea that has been used the most by other people, and I like that idea.
So, do you and Joseph Peter still get in contact with each other
Yeah, we're in contact all
today?
the time. We're
Okay.
we're he lives in Rome now he has four
hmm
children and a wife with
Okay.
him, and
hmm
yeah, so we communicate. I help to. So he had a brother in Sierra Leone that passed away.
Oh,
And the
oh
brother
dear.
left three kids, and I've been helping those kids get an education in Sierra Leone.
hmm
So, yeah, and for this film, A Refugee's Guide to Rome, my distributor, Buffalo 8, they wanted it to be longer than the original film. So,
hmm
fairly recently, I had a filmmaker in Rome shoot actually the underworld scene where Joseph walked to this particular part of Rome and then went through a church and then went down into the catacombs. This was an
hmm
old mine, and there's a lake under there. And it
hmm
was interesting because he was telling the story of how people in Sierra Leone will often go to the water
hmm
to get information from their ancestors. And this is exactly why Aeneas went underground to the
hmm
underworld to get information from his father. And then
Uh,
Joseph and Aeneas have like a lot of similarities. They're both
mhm,
pious, they're very
mhm,
respectful, they're both leaders of their people.
mhm,
And so I felt that the film like I regretted not including the underworld scene and the discussion of Joseph's and Aeneas's father. So when the distributor asked me to make it longer, I thought, hey, this is a great opportunity. So I got it done. And then when Joseph got to the underground lake, he like basically waded into the lake, which I thought was a cool part of the film.
Yeah. I don't know. I reminded me of this very well famous part in the Odyssey where Odysseus went to the underworld and met his like fallen comrades, and then there's Orpheus going down to the
Yeah.
underworld to find his lover Eurydice. So
Yeah.
it looks like Joseph went down to a similar
Yeah, it's interesting how these
as well.
stories they continue to like repeat themselves, like the story of the flood, for instance.
Mhm,
It's like a Mesopotamian story that then winds
mhm,
up in the Bible and so on and so
mhm.
forth. Yeah, they're kind of like
Yes.
timeless.
Yeah. So before we go, I want to ask, what are you currently working on, and what else or other else would you like to plug in?
Oh, well, I've because I've been working in Italy quite a bit,
Mhm,
I just recently went to a place called Bomarzo, Italy,
mhm,
where there's a
mhm,
place called Sacro Bosco or the Garden of Monsters. It's a really
mhm,
interesting place, and your listeners should, and you should, look it up. But
mhm,
anyway, it's 16th century Duke of Bomarzo, Vicino Orsini, made
mhm.
this mannerist garden sculpting monsters out of live stone. So I became really fascinated with this place, and I shot this year in March and the previous year in December, and so the film's in the can now, and I'm editing it right now. So the name of it will be something like The Dream of Monsters or Sacred Wood. I'm still juggling different names to figure out what it's going to be, but I'm really excited about it and looking forward to producing it.
Thank you for reaching out to us, and glad to talk with you about this documentary, A Refugee's Guide to Rome. So it's currently available everywhere, right?
Yeah, pretty much on most digital platforms. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully I could, if I have some time, I could give it a watch, and you listeners should give it a watch as well.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, me too. So, thank you, Ted, for talking with us. So, have a nice day.
Take care.
You just listened to Reanimate This Podcast. The opening theme music is Wanderlust, Celeste Mix by Celeste, and the ending theme music is Arizona Green Tea by Stuffy Doll. Please support their works on Bandcamp. The links are in the description.